All right, we're back with Nate. Nate, thanks for joining us again. We've got a Q&A session. Nate suggested to do this, and we posted a Q&A on the YouTube channel, and we got a ton of questions. So we're going to go through the top 15 or 16 questions. Let's start with the first question. Why does GM's 10-speed have more issue than Ford's, even though they were co-developed?
Well, thanks for having me on. So I don't believe, in my opinion, from what I see, that the failure numbers are radically different if you ignore one thing. And that one thing would be the feed limit valve failure in the General Motors / Allison 10-speed. That specific fluke is the only problem that makes them significantly more problematic than the Ford variation. Now, that doesn't mean that the Ford is also great. Nothing ever goes wrong. I mean, we're on the phone with Ford people every day of the week, all day, all the time. So keep in mind, neither of these are necessarily rock stars. They're both very cheaply made. But that specific feed limit problem is by far the biggest deal. And that's why we're applying for patent right now on the only feed limit delete kit in the entire industry. So it was very important that those pieces get taken out of the system. They're the cause of nearly every major problem in the Allison and General Motors 10-speed units.
I've got a friend that he's another YouTuber that he wants to talk to you about. We should have him on at some point and do a triple stream. And he questions the deletion of things like the feed limit valve. So he's worried that it's going to cause problems. So it'd be interesting to have a session about that.
Well, there's nothing to be worried about because we've been doing this on other transmissions for years. It works perfectly. It has only additive benefits to the transmission. There is literally no drawback. And we have all the long-term data necessary to know that on every other transmission we've ever done this for. And now that we've been doing this on General Motors and Allison 10 speeds, this idea has been in testing for a while before we actually sold it to the public. So whenever you see something come out from Next Gen Drivetrain, it's already been out in testing and prototypical environments for a very long time. So none of this is new stuff. We never hit the market with something where we're guessing. We've been early to market on stuff in the past, and we've learned as a company to take more time and make sure that we have tons of test vehicles, tons of feedback. So there's nothing to be concerned about. It's not up for debate. All available facts support that. And I'm very happy to debate that with anyone at any time because I'll win. It's simply true. It's not up for debate.
All right, next question. Should automatic transmission fluid ever be changed?
Yes.
Lifetime
yes.
fluid.
Lifetime fluid.
What do you think about that?
As someone who designs transmission parts every day, when people tell me that their transmission has lifetime fluid, I feel like I'm listening to someone tell me that they have lifetime undergarments or lifetime condoms. If you got to bleep that out, dude. I'm like, dude, that's not possible. All right, so let me explain where this claim comes from and why it's not true. OEMs say stuff like this as a selling point because by the time the selling point, so they call it, bites you in the ass, you're out of warranty. The reality is that the most effective way to terminate a transmission in a predictable period of time is to not maintain it. And so whenever you hear lifetime fill or something, that's complete BS. There is no lifetime fill for any other fluid. There's no reason there would be one for this, especially something that's exposed to so many heat cycles and moving parts. When you don't change your transmission fluid, you're running liquid sandpaper through the transmission. So what do I mean? If you think about it, what is sandpaper made from? Carbon, iron, silica, phosphorus, right? Things like that. You guessed it, that's the same material that makes up clutches. So clutches and sandpaper, although there's chemical differences, the elements that they're composed of is extremely similar. And so the particle size of a very high grit sandpaper, like 1800 to 2000, something like that, is very similar to the particle size of material coming off of clutches that are decaying in use. This means, let's look at it this way. So let's say the particle size in the fluid was like 40 grit sandpaper. What would the abrasive difference be between oil with particle size consistent with 40 grit sandpaper and actual 40 grit sandpaper? Almost nothing. Just one's paper and one's liquid. There's really no other difference. Well, when you are neglectful of your transmission fluid It eventually devolves into liquid sandpaper, somewhere in the 2,000, 4,000 grit range. Well, I know that that doesn't sound very intense. 2,000 grit sandpaper could be a blanket half the time. I get it. But the issue is that sandpaper is designed to do one thing, and it's generate abrasive force. Abrasive force is what damages the hydraulic parts in transmissions, leading to their premature failure. So when you don't change your transmission fluid every single day of your life, you're getting more particles in the oil coming from soft components in the transmission. So it starts as a blank sheet of paper, and it starts to accumulate these particles like sandpaper that are now on that hypothetical sheet of paper. And after several years of neglecting your fluid, it becomes an entire full dense sheet of high grit sandpaper. Fluid that is not changed in an automatic transmission is liquid sandpaper. Do not let anyone tell you to never service your transmission. That is fake news.
Is the so there's a lot of folks that I bet this question comes from when you get these high mileage. I remember back in the 4-speed GM days, people would not change their transmission fluid till 150, 180,000 miles. And then they would say, oh gosh, should I do it now? Because I haven't changed it for the first 150. And then there were all these stories running around of folks changing it, and then their transmission would go out 5,000 miles later. And their theory was, well, they dumped all the clutch particles out of the fluid, so now it's toast.
Yeah, no, that's not true. So let me tell you what we experience. A lot of people do not level transmissions correctly. They think it's like an engine where you get it right on the rack and then you drive away. Well, no, it's a lot more like coolant where you need to cycle all that air out. Okay. And once you fill your radiator to the top, if you have no coolant in your vehicle, you're going to go drive down the road, come back, and need to pour a whole bunch more in. And transmissions are more like that. And a lot of people don't understand that. And so one of the most common tech calls that we get, it's probably maybe a third of them, is people saying that they're having shifting issues or something because, as we ultimately discover, they don't have the right amount of fluid in the transmission. We provide instructions on how to do that. Unfortunately, some people don't read instructions. And so they get it leveled on the rack and they're like, okay, I'm good to go. And then they drive. And now oil fills all the different circuits of their valve body and fills the converter back up and everything. And now what was full on the rack is now 3 or 4 quarts low. Well, 3 or 4 quarts low is death by firing squad for a transmission. That's very serious. And so some people experience issues like that because they made a mistake doing something. And unfortunately, many of the people doing that are technicians. We've had people at dealerships say this stuff to us. And it's sad. It's very unfortunate. But my point is, I would be very confident. And I'm saying this as someone who owns a company that manufactures and designs these parts. And people call us for help and talk to an actual transmission builder so that they can get help. Like all of our tech support folk that we have ever had are actual transmission builders. They're not people that read the instructions back to you. They're people that do this for a living. So they know what they're talking about. And some of the most common calls we get is somebody who thinks that there's something wrong with their valve body, or they put something in wrong, or they want to blame somebody else, or whatever the deal may be. And then we say, why don't you check the transmission's fluid level? And they're like, well, it's right. I got it right. Have you checked it since then? And then after going back and forth for a little bit, we're like, dude, just check the transmission's fluid level. Let's just start there, right?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, yeah, I got another 3 or 4 quarts in it. 3 or 4 quarts. Think about a gallon of milk. Envision a gallon of milk. Now envision a transmission in your car. Well, a gallon of milk is a radical amount of fluid to a transmission. You don't think that not having that in there is maybe a bad idea? So I know firsthand how many people do not level their fluid correctly and then go try to drive and have issues. And that's why we include instructions on how to do it. And I believe that that's the reason a lot of those claims exist. There's a second reason, and I'll be quick with this one because I get winded. I know I talk a lot. The other thing people do is sometimes they use what's called a hot flush machine or a pressure flush or whatever you want to call it. And this in a high mileage vehicle that's been neglected can agitate a lot of particles that are in the valve body, in the pan, etc., and they can end up going somewhere where they create a problem. And so that's another reason that I would not recommend using a pressure flush machine in an elder transmission with a lot of miles on it. But here's what I would say. If you have a vehicle right now and you're like, okay, well, what do I do? Do I maintain it? Do I ignore it? What do I do? Here's what you do. Get an OEM filter, not the Chinese special, get an OEM filter. Take the pan off after you drain it, of course. And then here's what you do. You change the filter, you put the pan back on, you fill it up to OEM specification. You're going to have to burp the system, drive a little bit, and then check the fluid level again. You're going to want to check the fluid level every few miles until you don't have to add more, okay? And all you're going to do, like I said, is drain it, and then whatever gravity takes out, that's all you're going to remove. You're not going to get everything. That's okay. Don't worry about it. Drain it, get it back to OEM fill level. Make sure as you drive, you bring some oil with you because you might have to add more. As you burp all that air out, you're going to have to put more fluid in it. And once you don't have to add more, you are full. That is what you should do. And you should do it maybe every 30,000 miles. For a commuter vehicle, maybe more like 50. For a vehicle with a lot of idle time or aggressive use, or a performance vehicle, as needed, but definitely less than 30. That's my recommendation. But there's no such thing as lifetime fill. Lifetime fill is as dumb as a lifetime condom.
All right. Next question.
I'm glad you get a kick out of it.
Oh, yeah. Are the newer 6, 8, and 10 speeds inherently less reliable because of complexity?
I think that there would be a lot of dispute amongst experts on this topic. So I'll tell you what I think. I see both ends of the argument. More gears does inherently mean more complexity, especially when it comes to computerization. But these modern transmissions also lack a lot of parts that old transmissions did have that also went wrong, such as a mechanical governor, throttle valves, things like that. Governor pressure systems for managing governor pressure, like a transducer, a solenoid, any sort of valve that manages governor pressure. Those things were all eliminated with the transgression to computerized transmissions. Well, those things would wear out and have their own problems. For example, the 48RE is prone to having throttle valve bore wear, which triggers the transmission to have inappropriate shifting behavior. Sometimes what will happen is it'll hold a gear too long, or it'll short shift, things like that. And so when you have wear in the throttle valve, sometimes they use a steel one that's a little bit longer or something like that, or they ream it out. And that's how they correct that problem. So a lot of those parts no longer exist because they were replaced with software. So I think it's more of a trade-off. You would be surprised that a 10-speed transmission really doesn't have radically more parts, or might even be around the same as something like a 4-speed transmission in many cases. I wouldn't say the complexity is the biggest aggravating factor. I would say that cost cutting and the attempt to integrate software into a mechanical system is a lot of the problem, because these older transmissions that were maybe similarly complicated did not use a computer to manage them. Look at a power glide. What computer? There's no computer, okay? A TH400, no computer, all right? So these transmissions did not use computerization, Fordomatic, whatever have you. So although I would say the complexity would be similar, obviously a power glide is way simpler because there's only 2 gears. But my point is, if you take a 700R4 apart and you take a 10R80 apart, I like to think that if you could rebuild one, you could probably figure out the other if you're mechanically inclined. So I think that this is a debatable topic, but I think that it's objective that computerization has made things dramatically more difficult, specifically because you're now trying to integrate software and mechanisms together like cyborgs. I just think it's a bad idea.
What's the best half-ton transmission in the last 20 years?
Half-ton.
Yeah, I'm gonna. I mean, you could expand it. I want to hear the half-ton trucks, but also you can expand it if you just have like your favorite transmission in any vehicle in the last 20 years, whether it's SUVs or cars or whatever.
Half-ton. I would say Probably the 5 and 6 speed Aisin Warner, Aisin Seiki used in the early 2000s Toyota Tundras. Um, that's a 1 million mile unit, no questions asked, with proper maintenance.
Same
Um,
ones in is that's the same 6 speed that's in like a 2008 Tundra too, right?
I believe
Same
so. I believe
ASIN. Yeah,
so.
I think they put it
Yeah,
in until 2021.
probably.
It's
Yeah,
like
I know the.
they just
I know.
didn't change it.
Yeah, I know the AW8 and 10 came out later in the production scale, so I don't or schedules. So I don't know the specific year breaks on the Toyota
Yeah.
stuff the way that I do with domestics. I don't have them committed to memory the same way, but the 5 and 6 speeds that existed in the Toyota Tundra. I mean, they're just people abuse the hell out of them, and they're almost all still on the road. So
Yeah.
it's very high quality stuff. You're talking a lot of big, heavy steel parts. When you lift up a Toyota transmission and you lift up, say, a Ford transmission that's similar in size visually, the Toyota's way heavier.
Hmm.
It's very, very noticeable difference. And Toyota also has a special type of torque converter where the lockup clutch, instead of being like one big disc, it's usually a clutch pack like inside the transmission. And usually the input shaft will insert oil into the cover where it fills a galley where there's a piston that comes backwards away from the engine, the opposite of how most converters work, to engage that clutch pack, just like a clutch pack in the trans. When it does this, it synchronizes something called a TCC clutch hub, torque converter clutch hub, which splines into the input shaft. And so when this turns on, you're sucking the input shaft up to the speed of the engine. And Toyota's system for this is more reliable than I would say most systems are. So the other thing is that Toyota, and I've said this before, is a big inspiration to me with the parts that I have designed and that we manufacture because Toyota is not afraid to use very high quality steel. And maybe, maybe that's additive in terms of price, but I don't see anybody with 1.4 million miles on their 4L60E on original everything. There are
Yeah.
many people in the two comma club with Toyota transmissions on original everything. So I think it's important that people understand that context. I don't think that any domestic vehicle in the past 20 years with the exclusion of maybe the 5 and 6 speed Allison LCT transmission, was really all that impressive.
What's the best transmission in a brand new truck today? So maybe do 1500 and 2500.
Sure. In a new truck today. We did a video on the Powerline 8 where I said it's not a bad unit. It's going to have a couple of problems, because they're already out there, right? But it's definitely not bad. But my concern is how much it costs to fix when it does go bad, because if you get twice the life out of a transmission that you would with a competing product, but it's twice the price to fix, the actual net cost of ownership is not different. I was kind of critical of the ZF8, and people were very triggered about that. Well, here's what I'll tell you. As much as people think that I was bashing the ZF8, which I wasn't, I was being sober about it. I would say it's probably the best transmission in a consumer vehicle right now as it comes from the OEM. I really do believe that. I think the Powerline 8, I mean, look at its competition. It's the 10-speed Allison and the 10R140. Well, those are colossal hunks of Chinese garbage. So the ZF Powerline 8 is better by comparison. I mean, if you think about it, how attractive would a woman need to be the hottest woman in the room if the other women in the room are Hillary Clinton and Rosie O'Donnell? She doesn't need to be attractive. And that's how I feel about the Powerline 8 and then the 10-speed Allison and the 10R140. Well, Meg Griffin would be the hottest in the room. So I think that the ZF Powerline 8 is not in a high competition environment. So although I don't think it's perfect, I think it's definitely better than other options on the market right now. And so I would say the ZF8, and again, know what you're getting yourself into because it's not perfect. But I would say compared to other options, I think it would be the most attractive one. But I do question the value when you consider the cost of replacement and repair.
The one I just have in my Ram, it's a little bit better, but the cost of repair is probably going to be higher down the road.
I'll tell you this. Don't take my word for it. Call the dealership, give them your VIN, and say, hey, what's the price on a transmission and what's the price on you to put it in?
Yeah.
Compare that to a 4L80E and you'll crap yourself.
I think I know who wrote this or what they're going for. Thoughts on the 8L90, 8L80 family and whether the new 8L80 is actually improved. My guess is these are people looking at there's two vehicles that are really widely sold, the Chevy Colorado with the Turbo Max and the Silverado GMC Sierra with the Turbo Max.
So the 8L80 is basically a new generation of the 8L45 and 8L90. That's what it is. It's not radically different. The guts are almost all the same. Here's what General Motors usually does when they change a generation for a transmission. It's almost always just hydraulic changes. Up inside the case, everything is almost the same. Now, the 8L90 went through some changes with the input shaft, the turbine hub and the converter, stuff like that. The 8L80 you could think of as maybe a Gen 2 8L45/90. That's basically what it is. The 8L80 did not exist until very recently. The 8L45 and 90 go back to about 2014 in terms of when you could first start buying them. What they changed is a couple of valve dimensions, a couple of holes in the separator plates, stuff like that. But it's extremely similar. In fact, it's so much similar that our billet channel plate and our pulse dampener delete kit, only one on the market, it's so similar that that kit actually did not need redesigned for the 8L80 at all. It was a direct bolt-in. So there's no difference that's really worth talking about. They have the exact same problems. I understand that General Motors would lie to the public like they usually do, in my opinion, and say that they fixed everything. 90+% of the 8Ls out there have to be 45 and 90s because more cars were made with those. They're the ones with all the production time, right? Well, if you think about it logically, that would mean that maybe 10% of our calls are 8L80s. About 25% of the GM 8-speed calls are 8L80s. Could that be a function of people with the newer vehicle have a bit more cash and they're willing to do upgrades a little bit more proactively? Maybe. But what I would say is that, and I've said this before, and it makes people really upset, but it's true, so I'll say it. I don't care. General Motors never fixed the 700R4. They never fixed the 6L50. They never fixed the 8L45. Why would they fix whatever transmission you're thinking of? Why would they start with that one? They don't do that. And transversely, Ford doesn't either. So it's no better. You can think of the 8L80 as a facelifted, per se, 8L90. There's no major difference that's going to change your life. I would say the reliability is basically identical.
Okay. I know people are going to be, they're looking to buy those Colorados, the Canyons, and the better priced Silverados, and those are all running the 8L80s.
If you delete the pulse dampeners, okay, and you just change your fluid regularly, I'm not saying it's never going to fail. I'm saying you're going to get enough life out of it to where when it does, you probably won't be upset. You'll be like, you know what? I got my money out of it. It makes sense. The pulse dampeners are the number one longevity inhibitor for that transmission. That's why we're patenting the only fix for that with the billet channel plate and everything. You have to remove them. Pulse dampeners are, in my opinion, specifically designed to terminate transmissions. Just like lifetime oil fill, they tell you it's lifetime, and then when your transmission blows up at 70,000 miles and your powertrain warranty is 60,000 miles, well, what do you think Ford's gonna say, or Volkswagen, or whoever? They're gonna be like, "Oh no, you get to spend another $15,000 here." Do you think they're losing sleep over that? It's so obvious. And pulse dampening serves the same purpose, in my opinion. I understand that the OEMs would tell you it's about noise, vibration, harshness minimization, and all regulatory compliance. They're just lying. They lie every day of their life. This industry runs on fake news. They're lying. Why do you think people have such an issue with me? Because I'm calling them out for being liars. I'm not saying I'm perfect, because I'm not. I'm a human being. No one is perfect. But one thing I don't do is piss on people and tell them it's raining. And these OEMs continue to piss on people and tell them it's raining. You don't need pulse dampeners in your vehicle. I know, because we've sold hundreds of delete kits for these 8Ls, and they are universally in better condition. Did you know the reason that I designed the pulse dampener delete kit for the 8-speed GMs is because we started tracking failure data like we do many times. And out of 58 Ls that came in here, The principal cause of failure, meaning either number one, or in a case of compound failure, the most significant reason, was the pulse dampeners.
Hmm.
So that meant that out of 50, 45 of them would not have shown up here because of if they would have installed that kit. 45 out of 50 would not have shown up here.
Hmm.
Or they would have had to shown up here for a different problem at a later date. 45 out of 50. It's not 5 out of 50. It's not 8 out of 50. It's not 20 out of 50. 45 out of 50. Those are stellar odds. So I let facts tell me what needs to be designed. And those facts are at conflict with what the lying, dishonest propaganda heads at some of these companies continue to try and tell people.
All right. Oh, you know what? I was looking at our old videos. I think I maybe forgot because Nate sent me his unboxing videos from him getting a brand new 3rd gen valve body from GM. He unboxed it, sent me the videos, and I'm not even sure I put that in a video, but someone's asking, is the 3rd gen GM valve body better than previous generations?
No, no, it's all exactly the same, just like I said. They changed the dimensions on some of the valves. That doesn't really make a big difference, specifically the solenoid regulator valves, but it's the same material and everything. They moved one of the feed limit valves away from the default circuit so that when it wears out, you're going to end up not having the rear wheel locking up issue. And they closed off part of the casting for one of the 2 feed limit valves. So for people that say that me deleting feed limit valves is somehow a bad idea, General Motors just did it because it was the most unreliable part of the transmission. So it looks like I was correct again, and I did it first as usual. So I see people that say that I'm pompous, I'm full of myself. No, I'm correct, and I'm frustrated because I've been correct the whole time. And every time I'm correct about something, all these people with the pitchforks and the torches want to tell me how wrong I am. And then I get proven correct again. So I, at great sacrifice to my privacy and to people calling in and screaming at us and saying all these wild things to us because they feel like we're bad for the industry, I come up here and say things that I know are true and continue to get proven true. And once again, I was right. And I would ask somebody who thinks that I'm pompous or whatever, put yourself in my shoes and tell me how you would feel.
Yeah, it's I mean, at this point, I'm surprised people with how many problems General Motors has had since 2020. I'm surprised anyone still sides with the OEMs for any reason, but they still do.
I don't get it, but I'll put it this way. When General Motors is willing to put a lifetime unlimited mileage warranty on their product the way we do ours, maybe I'll listen to what they have to say. They're never going to do it. So,
All right, next one. Should high mileage transmissions be serviced or allow? We kind of answered this one. You said,
yeah, we touched on it. I would say it's never too late to pop the pan off. Just drain the fluid. Okay. Put a new filter in there. Don't go pressure washing and all that craziness. Take the pan off, OEM filter, refill it with the same specification of fluid or whatever's appropriate for your unit. Make sure it's leveled. Go through the leveling process I explain. Just because you're level doesn't mean you're level once you go drive. Go drive, level it again. Do this 2 to 3 mile drives. Do this again and again until you no longer have to add fluid. Make sure you're getting into all the gears, reverse and lockup, high speed, low speed, everything. That way, every part of the transmission is getting charged with oil. That's what you do. And once you no longer need to add fluid, you're good to go. That's what you should do. It's never too late to do that. It can only help, but make sure your fluid level is right. That's all.
What should owners of brand new 10-speed Ford and GMs do to improve longevity?
That's a question that I asked for a long time, and I invented the most effective upgrade kits on the market for both of them to solve the question. So you need steel valves to prevent valve erosion. They're billet steel valves that have been polished and tumbled to make sure that there's no erosive effect on the valve body, which slows down or in many cases stops bore wear, so that you don't end up with the cross-pollination of oil, the cross leakage of oil inside the transmission causing failures to happen. Okay, you need to delete unnecessary and redundant componentry. This is what our latch delete, pulse delete, feed delete, all of those products that we design for these transmissions to delete parts that don't need to be there. That's what they're so important for. It's just like deleting an EGR cooler. Well, you won't have any more EGR issues. right? In addition to that, thicker separator plate. Okay, all of the things that you see in our all-in-one comprehensive valve body upgrade kits, those things are all designed because we studied all of the major problems in these units, and we started with the most common and worked down to the least common, and we discovered that 99% of transmission failures can be prevented with a true comprehensive valve body upgrade. And we didn't see anything on the market that even came close to all those things. And that's why we tell people we want you to compare us to other people. We want you to do your research. You'll see why we're worth more. So, the most effective thing you can do is a comprehensive valve body upgrade kit. And people say, Nate, of course you say that. You're biased. I'm biased because I know all the facts, and my bias is towards what is actually correct. So, if I'm incorrect, please come up and tell me how. Otherwise, it looks like my bias is towards the sky being blue, 2 plus 2 equaling 4, and valve body upgrades that are comprehensive and totalitarian with billet steel everything and seals on valves where you can and deleting valves that don't need to be there is the most effective way to prevent mechanical failure of these transmissions. That, coupled with timely and responsible fluid maintenance, is exactly what you need to do.
I guess that answers this next question. Are the 10R80s actually reliable once you put an aftermarket valve body kit in?
Well, it depends what aftermarket valve body kit. If you're getting, some Chinesium, cheapo stuff that is literally lower quality than stock parts, if you're getting the cheapo stuff, you're not going to see a reliability difference. Just remember, a lot of things exist because people buy them. Like I've said before, we warranty things forever because they're not breaking. So I tell people the products that you put in are only as good as the outcome you're going to achieve. So if you get cheap stuff, you get a cheap outcome. If you get billet steel, everything, lifetime warranties, etc., that's the outcome you're going to get. So I'll answer the question assuming that person is talking about our valve body upgrade kits that we design with the billet steel and all that stuff. Absolutely. We sell complete valve bodies that have that kit in there as well with a lifetime warranty. We do that because they don't fail. I don't mean for this to be a commercial. That's not my intent, but I'm trying to explain in terms that make sense to everybody. We wouldn't be putting a lifetime warranty on something if we were going to have millions of dollars in warranty claims.
Yeah.
That as a business would not make sense. The reason that we're comfortable to do these unlimited mileage, lifetime, no power limit, crazy warranties is because no one's filing them. It's so uncommon. We deal with, for the thousands of people that buy stuff, we'll get a handful of them. It's so uncommon that it's almost free to provide those services. So yes, you can absolutely expect that outcome if you install the correct upgrades in your transmission. Now, as far as the CDF drum issue, if you have a very early Ford 10-speed, they had a CDF drum that was defectively designed where the bushing was coming out of place. This has since been updated through a bulletin, and all modern ones have that update. Contingent that you're in that category, and keep in mind that bushing moving is often caused by low lubrication pressure, and we have the highest lubrication pressure kit on the market. So even our kit decreases the chance of that problem very highly. So yes, I would say that the 10R80 can be highly reliable with an up-armored valve body. It doesn't mean it's 100% because nothing is. But I would say a good 99%. I don't have any issue with a 10R80 with billet steel everything. I wouldn't be averse to that.
Are OEM coolers and heat exchangers sufficient, or should owners add external coolers?
Well, regulating transmission temperature is one of the most effective ways to increase its longevity. So this is a really important question. I do not believe that adding subsequent coolers really makes a lot of sense because eliminating any sort of thermostat inside the valve body, which is what our kits are designed to do, the full charge technology, you get constant cooler flow. That's important, and that brings temperatures down way more than adding a slightly larger cooler. It doesn't have as much of an impact as people would like to believe it does. I'm not saying it has no impact because it does. But it's not the difference you may be thinking. So for example, people who install our 10-speed Allison kit, on average, before they install it, they run it about 191 degrees. And the reports that we get after the fact is about 140 degrees. So you're talking about 50-degree difference. with a valve body upgrade kit. You put another cooler on there, you might go from 190 to 175. The biggest difference is quite literally constant cooler charge. Now, a deep pan, I would say, is a second place upgrade because this increases the volume of oil. So if you think about it, transmissions generate heat through radiation, okay? And this radiation is a function of inefficiency. The more inefficient a system, usually the more heat that it puts out, right? And so the torque converter is about 70% of this, especially when it's unlocked. And so this creates, like I said, a thermal radiation effect where it energizes, it's almost like a microwave. It energizes that oil and creates heat, right? This is where the heat comes from. It's the same thing as an engine. All that stuff moving around creates heat, right? And the same thing happens in these transmissions. So when you can bring temperatures down, um, you're improving how long everything is going to last. And the pan, like I said, is probably the second most effective way to do that because you're now increasing the volume of fluid that needs to be heated up. So imagine you have a space heater in your house, you have a small house. And let's say you add 20% more room to your house by going from an 8-foot ceiling to a 9.6-foot ceiling. Well, now you have 20% more space for it to heat up. So that means that that space heater, instead of getting the room up to 70 degrees, might only be able to get it up to 65 degrees on a cold day, right? And that's what happens when you put a deep pan on the transmission. You're taking a space heater and making it fill a bigger room. And that's why deep pans, I would say, are a second place upgrade. I'd say that a bigger cooler is third place. I don't think it's a radical difference. I'm not saying you can't stack 50 of the damn things on top of each other with a bunch of fans. You can. But for the average person, it's not going to be a profound difference. As for heat exchangers are very different. Heat exchangers are where you take something hot and something cold and try to allow them to transfer energy together. And usually this is going to be transmission fluid and coolant. So what this does is it helps pull heat from the coolant into the transmission, and this helps regulate coolant temp and bring up transmission temp. I think it's a bad idea. I don't. I'm not a fan of heat exchangers. I think that vehicles generally run better without them. That's my own opinion. If someone disagrees, good for you.
How serious is torque converter shudder and what actually causes it?
Yeah, I'll tell you exactly what causes it. So torque converters, firstly, torque converter shudder is a common transmission drivability complaint. It's extremely common on transmissions like the, go figure, General Motors 6L50 and 8L series transmissions. And a lot of people believe it's a problem with the torque converter. They hear torque converter shudder. Okay, well, if I had a valve body leakage issue, I'd get a valve body. So if I have a torque converter shudder issue, maybe I should get a torque converter. That's incorrect. The number one cause of torque converter shudder is a hydraulic issue in the valve body on almost everything. So what torque converter shudder is a buffeting sensation, like a square tire feeling that happens when you're driving down the road. And it happens when the torque converter's clutch should not be turned on, but there's oil leaking into the circuit that does turn it on. So while the computer thinks that the converter should be off, mechanically it is attempting to be on. And so this is the transmission equivalent of resting your foot on the brakes and then going forward anyway. And the car's kind of jerking because those interests are competing, right? That's what torque converter shudder is. Well, that's not a brake issue. That's you having your foot on the brake pad while you're trying to accelerate issue. And the transmission equivalent of having your foot on the brake pad is having erosion inside the valve body, often from fluid maintenance and not deleting unnecessary parts from the valve body, whereby that oil is now exiting a circuit where it did, one task, and it's now going into a different circuit where it does a different task, and that task is turning the converter clutch on. So why does that create a shuddering sensation? Well, when the converter clutch turns on, you're taking the input shaft of the transmission and the crankshaft of the engine, and they're now spinning at the same speed. You're synchronizing them, okay? That's what that clutch does. So the torque converter is designed to allow a limited amount of slippage when that clutch is not turned on. And that slippage is called stall. So if that maximum slippage is 2,500 RPM, you have a stall speed of 2,500 RPM. Well, when the converter clutch tries to turn on at an inappropriate time, what it's trying to do is pull the engine speed down because you can't force the car to go faster that way. It's easier to pull the speed of the engine down. This is why when you hit lockup, your tachometer goes from up here to down here. You have a huge RPM drop. A lot of people think that's going into overdrive. Probably not. I mean, obviously it depends, but generally speaking, that huge RPM drop, that's not overdrive, that's lockup. The converter's clutch is turning on. Well, when you have the converter clutch dragging against the cover at an inappropriate time, it'll try to pull RPM down. Well, on modern transmissions, the computer tries to fight that by pushing more fuel. And so the computer will then push more fuel to bring RPM back up because the software sees it dropping. And so increasing fuel delivery would bring it back up. And so now you have two competing interests. You have the computer trying to fuel the engine through a potential stall condition, and you have the mechanisms of the transmission trying to activate a clutch that is turning on at an inappropriate time. And these conflicting interests result in a shuddering sensation. This blows torque converters up very, very, very quickly. Just like driving and riding the brakes will give you brake fade by the time you get to the supermarket. It's a very serious problem. And the correction is valve body upgrades. I understand that some people say, okay, well, no, there's a bulletin on this and you got to switch to this fluid or that fluid. No, you don't. You need to design a transmission that works correctly, like we do. And the way you do that is by eliminating redundant componentry, stronger parts, billet steel everything, sealing everything off, thicker plates, changing oil geometry, eliminating pulse dampening, feed limit systems. Everything that we designed is designed to make sure that these problems don't happen to people and that the vehicle performs at its best all the time. So that's what Torque Converter Shudder is. I hope I didn't lose anybody. But yes, it's very serious. And if you have converter shudder, give us a call. We'll take great care of you. But that's what it is.
I just learned something, so that's good. If I learned
What did
something,
you learn?
I'm sure others did. The details of torque converter shudder. I think when you go research this stuff online, you tend to get a couple sentences of garbage, and that was a much more detailed explanation than I've ever heard. So it's nice to visualize it.
See, I invent fixes for these things for a living. I know what I'm talking about, and nearly everything I say, I get proven right. And if I, and I know that I misspoke, and I in a previous video said Reebok instead of Adidas, making a comparison to the fashion industry, and everybody came for my life. And I'm like, listen, dude, everything I said was accurate, and I got the names mixed up. You know what I meant? Give me a break. All right. I apologize. I'm not a fashion designer. I'm an engineer. No one asked a stripper how to do calculus. Okay.
Right.
Give me a break, man. Here we go.
What are the top 3 most reliable trucks from 2000 to 2020? That's a big range.
Yeah. Well, obviously, early Toyota Tundra has to be on there. So there's the gasser one, early 2000s.
GMs in the 2000s. Do you like those?
If it came with a 4L80 or 85, I would say, yeah. All the switch gear and seats and everything will crumble apart, but the powertrain's reliable. I actually have a vehicle like that. I have a 400,000 mile Silverado 1500 that is kind of an emotional vehicle for me. Yeah, I'd say early General Motors. Anything that was the whole like Tahoe, Yukon, Silverado, suburban platform, all of that. I forget the code name for the platform, but K-body or whatever. I don't know. Cello could chime in, but my point is definitely the early model GM stuff, half ton and heavy duty.
What about
And
diesels?
I would say 7.3 liter Ford Power Stroke with the ZF manual transmission or the 4R100 transmission. I know that's 2000. Yeah, that was one of the only vehicles that used hydraulic electronic unit injection for a fuel system that didn't suck. The 6 liter Power Stroke, I can't tell you how many people I have seen in my life with a crank no start on those because of low ICP. And that does happen on the 7.3, but it's much more uncommon. It's a very reliable platform. So I'd say the 7.3 Power Stroke as well.
Will the 2500, 3500 transmissions improve for General Motors now that Allison has pulled their name?
Absolutely not, because nothing's going to change. It's the exact same transmission. It was never an Allison transmission. That was a psyop by General Motors to manipulate the public and abuse their goodwill in the Allison name. Allison has nothing to do with designing that transmission, in my opinion. I'm sure, they'll send me a nasty letter. That's fine. And no, nothing's going to change. It was a big 10L80 before. It's going to be a big 10L80 now. Nothing is going to change. It's going to be the same garbage it was this entire time. I can assure you, if anything, Allison putting their name on it made General Motors at least pretend to care, which even that I think is a stretch. But no, you're not going to see any major changes because there's nothing actually different about it.
I was just going to ask you, do you think could it actually get worse?
I mean, that would be good for me and my staff. So, I mean, have at it. Dude, I make a living off these companies being bad at what they do. And the craziest part is we have reached out to some of these companies and said, hey, like, this is what we do. We fixed a lot of problems for you guys. Can we work together? And they literally don't care. And I get a kick out of that because, like, I have a meeting with a very important gentleman at Dorman on Wednesday because they're going to start using our stuff. So they say they would like to, right? We're going to talk about it and see if we can do business together. Other big companies want to work with us. And
That'd be
and
cool.
yeah, but somehow we reached out to General Motors and said, "Hey, I have the fix for your problem." And I actually got really high on the totem pole there. And everyone was on board. And somebody above anyone I talked to clearly said, "No, we're not going to do that. Nope, shareholders first."
Financiers.
I know.
What does it mean? This is going to be one of your favorites. What does it mean to delete pulse dampeners or feed limit valves and valve bodies?
Sure. So, one of the biggest problems with modern transmissions, and frankly, many transmissions, even older ones, is that they possess a lot of parts that don't need to be there. And they serve no functional purpose other than overcomplicating the system. This would be latch valves, some lube regulator valves, pulse dampeners, accumulators, feed limits, if I didn't say that already. Almost all of these things can be bypassed or literally just deleted. And I design kits to do that yourself at home. And I believe that this is one of the most important things anybody can do for a transmission because people say, well, what's the drawback? What drawback? You're removing a part that's not going to fail you anymore. I mean, I don't understand. People say, oh, well, the part has to serve a purpose. It does. Making sure your transmission fails so they can sell you another one. I'm making a delete kit. What's the problem? So these components inside the transmission often do meaningless stuff. So, for example, pulse dampeners. The theory is that they dampen oil trying to turn a clutch on. Well, let's do the math for a little bit. Pulse dampeners are a tiny piston that strokes back and forth and allows oil to get where it's going. And basically, it's like a shock absorber for the gear shift, so they say. All right. Well, and if you remove them, somehow the whole transmission is going to blow up. That's why everybody buys our kits and loves them. So let's do the math. It takes, depending on the transmission and the clutch, usually between 35 and maybe 110 cubic centimeters to turn a clutch on. So if we think about that, let's take 100 as a round number. Now that's high, but I'm just going to use it as a round number. 100 cubic centimeters of oil. If a pulse dampener has 1 square centimeter of surface area and can move half a centimeter in terms of maximum stroke at full pressure, that would mean that pulse dampener is dampening, it's adding precisely 0.5 cubic centimeters of oil flow to the clutch pack, right? Like it's an additional 0.5 cubic centimeters to turn the clutch on. What that means is that if that clutch requires 100 cubic centimeters to activate of oil, and we have dampened 0.5 cubic centimeters of that, that means that we effectively slowed down the application of the clutch by about half of 1%. How can that make a difference? It doesn't. It's there to make the transmission fail. Duh. And so I've been saying this from the jump, and people are like, Nate, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, well, then how about you grab a whiteboard and come up here and explain to me how everything I've ever invented doesn't work And you're the genius this automotive industry has been waiting for 100 years. The guy who's going to tell me that pulse dampeners are good for consumers. And that's why they're the reason that 45 out of 50 GM 8-speeds that have shown up to this company had fried pulse dampeners. And that was the only thing that brought them in here. People are, not everybody, but many people in the automotive industry are part of two categories. One is stupid and two is malicious. And I don't have time for that. I live in a world of facts. That's what science is. Science is where you study facts in the pursuit of absolute truth. I'm a scientist. Sometimes I see facts that I don't like. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I can tell you now, if you can delete pulse dampeners from your transmission, do it. Feed limit valves, lube regulator valves, latch valves. What are they going to do? Not wear out and cause problems? They're not there anymore. People just need to listen to the facts.
All right, this might be last good question I think we had, but there are more. It's just getting long. Thoughts on bore wear on 8 and 10 speeds? So I know you've talked a lot about the high porosity valve bodies and how they tend to. I've seen a lot of questions related to bore wear, like, okay, I've got 80,000 or 100,000 miles. Now I want to get a valve body kit, but I have bore wear, or they think they do. What are your thoughts on that?
So I specifically designed these kits to correct bore wear. That's the whole point. That's why they have seals, and then we prevent it in the future with the polished steel valves. In fact, we just spent a whole bunch of money on a tumbling machine so that we can get them as smooth as almost a damn mirror. It's beautiful. And that's part of the beauty of manufacturing in-house here in America, is we have control over those things. But bore wear in the valve body, which is the process whereby oil leaks around the valves because the valves and the casting have worn out together and now they don't seal properly anymore. Bore wear is caused primarily by two things. One is cheap parts, and two is neglect of oil maintenance. Those are the two main things. Okay, well, cheap parts, first off, that's our whole purpose, is to just give you billet steel so you don't have to worry about it and you can seal stuff off and delete it and you can solve this problem in your driveway and we all move on with our life. So we have the fix for that, but we can't change your oil for you. And that's the other half of the equation. Oil turns into liquid sandpaper. I explained the chemistry to that earlier in the video. Change your darn oil, okay? Change your oil. Sorry, I keep things PG for you. Change your oil, because it's nuts. It's like not changing your underpants. Like, the hell's wrong with you? Just change them. Change your oil. Pull the pan, drain it, add back in what you took out, make sure it is leveled. Okay, drive it around, keep leveling it. Eventually, you won't have to add any more oil because you'll have burped it. Just drain and fill with a new OEM filter, maybe every 30,000 miles on average. You would be shocked how much lifespan you add to these transmissions.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Nate. We appreciate it. I think we'll see how many questions we missed. Maybe we'll do a round 2 at some point. I mean, there were a lot more questions, but I think we tried to deduplicate and combine them into more philosophical stuff. I think you did a great job answering. So, yeah, thanks.
Cool. Thanks for having me on. Anytime.